What is up everyone, Nick here, and in today's video we are going to be building our very own Bumblebee helmet for Transformers 1 with removable faceplates. Personally, I've always been a huge fan of Transformers, even since I was a kid. But more specifically, I've always been a very big fan of Bumblebee. Well, okay, maybe not that big, but I also somehow have so many Bumblebee figures, I have genuinely no idea why. So let me just move this aside and show you guys all my Bumblebee figures. Boop, boop, boop. So here we have Allspark Power Stealth Bumblebee, Dark of the Moon Deluxe Class Bumblebee, the regular version, Dark of the Moon Cyberfire Bumblebee, the spicier version, Walmart exclusive Bumblebee, Dark of the Moon Nitro Bumblebee, Dark of the Moon Transcam Bumblebee, Dark of the Moon Human Alliance Stealth Bumblebee, Age of Extinction High Octane Bumblebee, Age of Extinction Deluxe Regular Bumblebee, The Last Night Deluxe Bumblebee, Transformers Movie Masterpiece MPM03 Bumblebee, and last but not least we have Dark of the Moon Burger King Bumblebee. My favorite. So you could say I am a connoisseur of Bumblebees, but knowing the internet, you're probably not gonna say that. But with this out of the way, I'm going to take it back to Past Nick, where we're going to start working on this helmet. Take it away, Past Nick. Thank you, future me. Oh, I need to rebuild the helmet. Wow, that's such a dumb joke. So as you can see, I've already 3D printed the parts, but now I'm going to discuss with you guys how I 3D printed these parts. So for this project, I ended up using the Elegoo Neptune 4 Pro. It is a solid little printer. It is the natural evolution of the Neptune 3 Pro, which I already own two of. Now the first obvious change between the 3 and the 4 Pro is this giant cooling fan setup on the X-axis. And it also has a few other little changes which greatly improve the performance, like pre-installed clipper. And it also has like these really neat bearing rails. It's not quite a linear rail, but it's also not the palm wheels that you usually see on 3D printers. It's pretty interesting and I kind of like it. And you've most likely already figured this out, but I had to slice the helmet into separate parts because this 3D printer is quite tiny. Like if we just take a look at the bed, like you can't quite fit a whole dome on this exactly. But that's totally okay because we have a few workarounds that we're going to be discussing today. So if you're like me and you're using a small 3D printer to print a large object, here's what we're gonna do in Orca Slicer. Basically, we're going to be using the cutting tool in Prusa Slicer, or in this case, Orca Slicer, and we are going to split the helmet into 4 quarters. And while we're at it, I'm going to try the Add Connectors feature so that we can add alignment holes and alignment pins, which should be really helpful when re-gluing all the parts together. Personally, I've never used this function, so I'm excited to see the results. And before we start printing these parts, we are going to be adding supports using the Paint Supports tool. So we're going to increase this slider here to highlight the overhangs and toggle this on overhangs only button. And now we can just select all the areas on the parts we want supported. And once everything looks good, we can send the G-code over to the Neptune 4 Pro and we can 3D print everything in Elegoo's Silk Gold filament. And now that I finally have all the 3D printed parts here, I'm really annoyed with myself that I've never actually used silk filaments before. Because look at this, if I grab this part here and just move it around in the light in the studio, like the shine on this is so cool. And this filament is very useful for a project like this where we're going to be doing very minimal painting because the raw filament itself is absolutely awesome and the reflectivity kind of helps hide some of the layer lines. So this means we can save time and money by not sanding the filament and just leaving the raw filament as it is. So as you can see, we have all the 4 quarters here. We also have the faceplate 3D printed and we have these 2 tiny earpieces we need to attach. But one last thing I need to do is finish removing some of these supports. So these supports used up quite a bit of filament while 3D printing. As you can see, I have an empty spool here and I have a spool right here that's nearly empty. So that's quite close to 2 rolls of filament I used up for this one helmet. But point is, I'm gonna get to removing these supports and we're finally going to start gluing everything together. And to do that, I'm going to be using Starbond's multi-purpose high-performance super glue. Starbond was nice enough to send me a huge care package of different super glues and epoxies, so a huge thank you goes out to Starbond for supporting this project, and make sure you go check them out after this video. Now, unfortunately, the alignment pegs were a little bit more trouble than they were actually worth, and that's kind of on me. So you see, the walls on these 3D printed parts are quite thin. They're only 5 millimeters thick, so the alignment pegs had to be smaller than 5 millimeters. So they were closer to like 3, maybe even 2 millimeters. So a lot of the alignment pegs that were printed vertically on this axis ended up breaking off just from moving the part around and from removing the supports because they were so delicate. And that really comes down to the layer lines and how they were facing. So you see, layer lines like to split along this axis and they don't like to split along this axis. So these ones are super strong. These ones were super weak. But honestly, this was probably not the best use case to be using these alignment pegs, but you live and you learn. So I'm gonna start gluing some of these parts together using whatever alignment pegs I have left, and I'm also going to be using Starbond's medium super glue. And while we're at it, I'm also going to start gluing some of the 8x2mm magnets that we're going to need to attach everything together later on in the video. Now, I didn't 3D print the face for the Bumblebee helmet, nor did I 3D print the visor for the battle mask. And that's because those were 3D printed by this channel sponsor, PCBWAY. If you don't know it already, PCBWAY is the industry leader when it comes to PCB fabrication and 3D printing services. From custom circuit boards to innovative 3D printed prototypes, PCBWAY offers unparalleled quality, fast turnaround times, and competitive pricing. And if you would like a discount on your very first order, I have a referral link in the description. So I got the parts in the mail a few days ago, and I knew they would look really good while I was unboxing them, but I had no idea they would look this good. So the faceplate was not only SLS printed in super durable resin, but it was also electroplated in chrome by PCBWAY, which gave it this insanely reflective finish. Meanwhile, the visor for the battle mask was 3D printed in clear resin, and then it was sanded and varnished, and then tinted in this super nice blue. This resin printed visor is so clear that the visibility right through it is practically perfect. So I'm going to glue this visor into the battle mask, and then I'm going to glue some magnets onto the faceplate. Now we could stop there, but that's lame. So the very first thing I'm going to do with this newly built helmet is paint some of the details on the helmet black. So for example, these vents on the cheeks here and these details underneath the little earpieces on the helmet, I'm gonna mask those off and paint those black. And then I'm going to grab some silver rub and buff and add silver to some of the raised edges to make it look a little bit worn. And once I have the paint all figured out, I'm finally going to glue these little earpieces onto the helmet, and then we're gonna move on to the lights and sounds. What, you thought I was gonna build a Transformers helmet and not put electronics in it? You're crazy. So for the lights for the faceplate, I'm going to be gluing in these. Now these are what are known as cosplay LED eyes. Basically, you have this tiny battery, which is 2 AAA batteries with a kill switch, with a wire that leads to 2 LEDs, and these LEDs are attached to these clear pieces of plastic that are kind of flexible. And on one side, you have a bunch of white dots, and on the other side, you have nothing. Now we are going to be gluing the side that has nothing towards the outside of the faceplate. That way the light will reflect off of these white dots and make it look like the eye is full. But when the lens is really up close to our eye, we can actually see right through it. Now these are actually quite cheap and very useful. I'll leave a few links in the description to either Amazon or Aliexpress where you can buy these. So what I think I'm going to do, since there's really not a lot of space inside this head, I am going to glue in the LED eyes like so, and I'm gonna glue the batteries to the top of the eyebrow. And the reason why is if I glued it in the mouth section, it would literally be right against my lips. And with all that, we're pretty much done. I could add some extra padding inside the helmet to make it a little bit more comfortable, but honestly, the scale is so perfect that I don't really need the padding. It just sits correctly on my head as is. So I'm just going to unplug the microphone for the voice amplifier just so I can toss it onto my head. And it looks pretty good. Now all we have to do is slap in the faceplate just like so. It's a little hard to get it to properly align with the magnets, but yeah, I'm a robot. I can robot it up. Look at me roboting it in. Okay, I am going to, ow, that hurt. Put this one aside. Let's try out the battle mask. See if I can do this. Yeah, I can. There we go. I got a battle mask. Oh, this thing is so cool. Wow. I wonder how well you guys can see my face through the visor. I did not do any sort of one-way tinting so that people can't see inside the visor. And I think that's all right. It looks good as is. I personally really don't mind. But yeah. And they're interchangeable, so I can have this one. I can put this one on. This is awesome. So in a few hours, I'm going to be attending the pre-screening fan event at my local movie theater, and I'm probably gonna be bringing this along. But with that said, that's going to be it for today's video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit that like and subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it. And if you have any questions, any suggestions for future projects and future videos, please let me know in the comments down below. And hopefully I will see you all in the next one.